In the second half of the 20th century, South Korea rose from the ashes to become one of the most dynamic economies in the modern world. Until then, it had endured decades of Japanese occupation, the devastation of World War II, and a painful territorial division. And yet, the country transformed at an astonishing pace, driven by the determination of its people and the vision of bold business leaders. One of them was Kim Woo-jung, the architect behind Daewoo. Because Daewoo wasn't just a company, it was an empire. At its peak, it became the second largest conglomerate in South Korea and an undeniable symbol of the nation's economic miracle. It expanded into key sectors: construction, technology, international trade, and, of course, the automotive industry. Its car division, Daewoo Motors, defined an era with models like the Tico, a compact urban car that became a commercial and cultural phenomenon across numerous emerging markets. But in the late 1990s, the spectacular fall of this enigmatic company was just as dramatic as its meteoric rise. How did Daewoo go from one of the most powerful groups in Asia to declaring bankruptcy? What role did the government play in its growth and in its downfall? And does any trace of it remain today? Today, we journey back to the heart of the 20th century to uncover the story of a fallen titan, a conglomerate that defined an era and whose echoes still resonate through the ghosts of Asian capitalism. The story of Daewoo begins on December 19, 1936, with the birth of Kim Woo-jung, also known as Kim Woo-jung, during the Japanese occupation of the Korean peninsula. His childhood unfolded in a nation torn apart by war, poverty, and colonial oppression, as the echoes of Japanese expansionism clashed with the looming outbreak of World War II. Although Kim Woo-jung experienced hardship and delivered newspapers during his teenage years, his story didn't begin the same way as other industrial titans. Unlike the founders of Hyundai or Kia, who were shaped by the mud of rice fields and the harshness of manual labor, Kim grew up in an intellectual household. His father, a renowned university professor, gave him access to an elite education, an extraordinary privilege in a country where most children barely worked to survive. After the war, Korea was divided. The North came under the communist regime of Kim Il-sung, while the South, led by Syngman Rhee, plunged into an era of repression, political chaos, and systemic poverty. But among the ruins, some young minds found refuge in books. Kim Woo-jung was one of them. He graduated in economics from the prestigious Yonsei University and soon found work at a textile company. There, he learned the fundamentals that would later define his business philosophy: efficient manufacturing, export-driven growth, and strategic market analysis. During this period, he began to emerge as more than a capable administrator. His ambition wasn't just to succeed, it was to help rebuild his nation. And the opportunity came in the form of a military regime. In 1961, General Park Chung-hee seized power through a coup d'état. Though authoritarian, Park had a clear vision: to transform South Korea into an industrial powerhouse. To do so, he established a symbiotic alliance between the state and select family-run conglomerates that would drive development in exchange for tax breaks, trade protection, and financing. These groups became known as chaebols. Inspired by the meteoric rise of companies like Samsung and Hyundai, Kim Woo-jung knew his time had come. In 1967, with a modest loan of 5 million won, around $4,500 at the time, and a team of just 5 people, he founded Daewoo Industrial, initially focused on the textile trade and exports. The name Daewoo was no accident. In Korean, it can be translated as the Great Universe, or the Great Cosmos, a bold statement of intent. For Kim, his company wasn't just meant to grow, it was meant to leave a legacy. What started as a small garment factory would soon expand like a galaxy in motion, spinning into the core sectors of the global economy. Daewoo's rise was as fast as it was relentless. Just 2 years after its founding, in 1969, the young company made national history by becoming the first South Korean firm to open an overseas office, launching its branch in Sydney, Australia. By 1972, it had already signed key export agreements with Singapore and Hong Kong, two of Southeast Asia's most dynamic markets. And just a year later, Daewoo joined the wave of conglomerates beginning to redraw South Korea's industrial landscape. This momentum was reinforced by the first 5-year industrial development plan, launched by the South Korean government to encourage chaebols to diversify into strategic sectors. Kim Woo-jung wasted no time. In 1975, Daewoo acquired a shipyard in Okpo, marking its entry into the shipbuilding industry. A year later, it expanded into electronics, producing ovens, microwaves, and televisions. Soon after, it entered the defense sector, manufacturing weapons and military equipment under government contracts. In 1979, Kim founded Daewoo Engineering and Construction to go head-to-head with Hyundai in the lucrative infrastructure industry. By 1981, his empire operated in more than 50 countries and employed over 100,000 people. Daewoo was now the second largest conglomerate in South Korea, just behind Hyundai. But one key piece was still missing: the automotive industry. Kim had a clear strategy. He wasn't aiming to build from scratch, but to acquire struggling companies and revive them through financial muscle and global vision. In 1982, he applied this formula by acquiring Seihan Motors, an assembler that operated under General Motors licenses. This move not only sidestepped the steep learning curve of technological development, it also granted Daewoo access to GM's international network, enabling exports from day one. In 1983, Seihan Motors was officially renamed Daewoo Motors, and its first model was launched, the Daewoo Royale, a luxury sedan aimed at the local market. It was followed in 1984 by the Daewoo Maepsi, a compact sedan based on an Opel. Then, in 1986, Daewoo released two key models: the Daewoo Racer, its first internally developed car designed to compete against the Hyundai Excel and Kia Pride, and the Daewoo LeMans, which captured a large share of the domestic market. Daewoo's automotive offensive was undeniable. By the late 1980s, the company had expanded operations into Eastern Europe, Latin America, Russia, and Central Asia, positioning itself as a global disruptor. In the 1990s, Daewoo pushed for even greater diversification. In 1990, it unveiled the Daewoo Espero, designed in collaboration with Italian design house Bertone. Then came the brand's most iconic model in 1991, the Daewoo Tico. Inspired by the Suzuki Alto, the Tico became a turning point. Affordable, compact, versatile, and incredibly fuel-efficient. It became a mass-market phenomenon in countries like Poland, Peru, Chile, Colombia, Russia, and China. More than just a city car, it was a symbol of mobility for the people, and in many cases, a family's very first car. This success fueled Daewoo's global expansion. Throughout the decade, it opened plants in Poland, India, Uzbekistan, and Russia. By 1996, the Korean colossus employed over 320,000 people worldwide. Its automotive division, Daewoo Motors, had climbed to 6th place globally in vehicle production. outpacing industry titans like Renault, Fiat, and Nissan, with over 1.5 million units sold per year. This ascent wasn't just thanks to its cars. It was the result of perfect synergy within the Daewoo Group. Daewoo Electronics manufactured audio systems. Daewoo Engineering built factories and dealerships in emerging markets. And Daewoo Shipbuilding handled global maritime transport of the vehicles. It was a fully integrated machine, engineered for frictionless expansion. Daewoo was competing head-on with industry legends like Toyota and Volkswagen, companies with a decade's more experience. But as spectacular as its rise had been, a free fall was on the horizon. By the end of 1997, the Asian financial crisis shook the foundations of Southeast Asian economies, and Daewoo would soon become the most sobering case study in the history of Asian capitalism. What was really happening in their financial books? How did they fund such explosive growth? For years, Daewoo's meteoric rise was hailed as an industrial miracle. But behind all the glitter, a disturbing truth was hidden. The giant had been built on a mountain of debt. Much of its growth was financed through aggressive borrowing, both short and long term. The conglomerate seemed unstoppable, but its business model had a fatal flaw. It wasn't sustainable without abundant, cheap credit. And in 1997, that credit vanished. The Asian financial crisis struck like a sudden storm. The South Korean won plummeted in a matter of days. Local banks collapsed, and the foreign capital flows that had fueled the Chaebols' expansion for years were abruptly cut off. Daewoo, with its highly leveraged structure, was left completely exposed. The South Korean government, up to that point a staunch protector of the chaebols as engines of national growth, was forced to surrender. It had to request a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, and with it came harsh conditions. Eliminate subsidies, allow bankruptcies, and dismantle the state's support system for large industrial groups. While other chaebols like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG began selling off assets, laying off workers, and restructuring operations to survive, Kim Woo-jung chose a different path. He refused to surrender. Instead of cutting back, he kept acquiring new companies. He bet the crisis would be short-lived. He bet and lost. By the end of 1998, Daewoo's debt had ballooned to over $50 billion, one of the largest corporate debts ever seen in Asia. The situation had become untenable. Realizing the collapse was imminent, Kim tried desperately to halt the downfall. He sought new lines of credit, offered bonds with sky-high interest rates, some reaching up to 30%, and attempted to negotiate a direct government bailout. But this time, the rules had changed. Under the IMF's supervision, there would be no more lifelines for failing conglomerates. In August 1999, the official order was given. Daewoo had to be dismantled. One by one, its divisions were sold off. Its factories and strategic assets were handed over to foreign companies or local rivals. Its automotive arm, Daewoo Motors, was put up for sale. Kim Woo-jung, once a national symbol of success and modernity, fled the country. He knew prosecution was inevitable. The fall of his empire didn't just leave an economic void. It left a moral wound in a nation that had once hailed him as one of its great architects of progress. And so ended one of the most sprawling business empires Asia had ever seen in the 20th century. Not because of competition, not because of a lack of vision, but because of unchecked ambition, the weight of unsustainable debt, and a system that finally chose to let him fall. After Daewoo's implosion, Kim Woo-jung, vanished from the public eye. He spent several years abroad, mainly between France and Vietnam, away from the spotlight and the scrutiny of the media. But in 2005, the businessman decided to return to South Korea. His comeback was anything but quiet. He was arrested and sentenced for accounting, fraud, and embezzlement. During his self-imposed exile, the South Korean government had launched an in-depth investigation into the conglomerate's collapse. What surfaced was devastating. Daewoo had artificially inflated its earnings, manipulating its financial statements to keep securing loans. The 1997 crisis wasn't the cause of the downfall. It was merely the trigger that revealed the true state of the giant. But beyond Daewoo, the financial scandal shook the very foundations of South Korea's economic system. Hundreds of local banks, having lent without proper guarantees, were exposed. Public trust in the chaebols crumbled. In his first public statement after his arrest, Kim Woo-jung attempted to acknowledge the weight of his decisions. "I return to take responsibility for my mistakes. I offer my apologies to the Korean people." He was sentenced to 10 years in prison but served only 18 months, thanks to a presidential pardon granted in 2007. His release divided public opinion. To some, Kim was a symbol of the industrial effort that had lifted the country out of poverty. To others, he embodied the impunity of powerful businessmen. Either way, the controversial life of Kim Woo-jung came to an end in 2019. He died at age 83 in Seoul. But what became of Daewoo's remains? Its automotive division was acquired by General Motors and rebranded as GM Korea. Since then, it has produced models like the Chevrolet Spark, Aveo, and Lacetti, all still assembled in the same factories from Daewoo's golden era. Other branches of the company were either absorbed or dissolved. Daewoo-branded appliances are still sold under license in countries like China, Turkey, and Vietnam. In some cases, the name Daewoo still appears, though disconnected from its original roots. Its shipbuilding arm, once one of the group's pillars, was eventually acquired by Hyundai Heavy Industries, completing a full-circle moment in which Daewoo's fiercest rival became its ultimate successor. But beyond factories and trademarks, Daewoo's greatest legacy was its cautionary tale. The country learned, painfully, that uncontrolled growth, fueled by unchecked debt, leads down a path as fast as it is self-destructive. Since then, South Korea has transformed its economic model. The chaebols now operate under tighter regulations, greater oversight, and reduced dependence on public funding. Despite its fall, the Daewoo name hasn't faded from memory. Especially in regions like Eastern Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia, the Daewoo Tico became a cultural icon. Affordable, simple, and reliable, it was the very first car for millions of families, a symbol of progress, of joining an emerging middle class that dared to dream of a better life. And what about you? What's your take on Daewoo's story? Do you think the government should have stepped in to save the company? This concludes the fascinating story of Daewoo, an example of how one man's vision can transform a humble business into a global empire, but also a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked debt-driven expansion. If you ever had experience as a Daewoo customer, or if you're a fan of the automotive world, don't forget to leave us your thoughts in the comments. And if this story captured your attention, don't miss the journey of another company that started as a humble bicycle workshop, but ended up producing the first car ever made on Korean soil, Kia Motors. See you in the next video.